What has struck me in the year and a half or so that I've been interested in the subject is that there is no celebrity. You said maybe the lady who wrote Seabiscuit. There's no celebrity the way AIDS picked up celebrities after a while, particularly Elizabeth Taylor. There is no lobby. And I'm in Washington, and every day I hear different lobbies for breast cancer, for breathing, for various lung diseases, for everything. They're lobbies, and they're loud, and they're present, and they're raising money, and they're heard everywhere. But of course, there is no lobby.
It's because actually this disease is so debilitating that patients actually dissipate their savings very early. By dissipating their savings very early, because they can't work, there's no money actually to be spent actually on incidental things such as contributions to societies that actually promote this disease or research. And the disease actually is so misunderstood that the lobby against the disease is pervasive.
Why are so many physicians hostile? I've spoken to a lot of physicians, some of them I know socially, and some of them treat me for various aches and pains, and they all brush it away, all of them. I have not found one, except a neighbor of mine who has taken an interest, but who is wildly ill-informed about it, but is at least interesting as a gastroenterologist. But all the other doctors I've spoken to have, oh, it's psychiatric. One even has somebody in their practice, and they refuse to take it seriously. I find that extraordinary.
It's called arrogance. But that's not actually, it's not the first time actually that arrogance of us doctors has been portrayed. In early multiple sclerosis, patients actually were told that they were hysterical 20, 30 years ago. They were told they're hysterical because they actually had twitches.
What, could you tell us, what have you been doing in your practice to treat people heretofore before getting involved with the Ampligen? What do you find works the best?
We have a protocol.
Yeah.
We believe it's an immune system dysfunction.
Right.
And over the years we actually have developed a protocol to act on the immune system. And the protocol actually was based on a substance called cutopressin, which was used by Steinbach in Texas 20 years ago. When I came back actually from this trip to Ireland, that was actually what I first started on. And the cutopressin method that Steinbach and his co-workers in Texas used was based on an immune system adjuvant. And this immune system adjuvant is derived from an amino acid complex. It's a prescription injection. And was originally used in the 1950s. It's not new. It was used against actually the herpes zoster virus for shingles. So Steinbach and his co-workers thought, as some of the viruses that were implicated in MECFS were herpes viruses. Epstein-Barr is a herpes virus, cytomegalo-inclusion virus is a herpes virus. HHV6 is a herpes virus, HHV7 is a herpes virus. The idea that a virus could actually be implicated in this disease is not new. Melvin Ramsey in 1955 first called this disease post-viral fatigue in the Royal Free Hospital in London. And the idea that Steinbach had would be that he would actually treat his patients with this cutopressin. Unfortunately, a small percentage of patients actually reacted, and the idea was not readily accepted. So therefore, the general consensus of research was, well, as only a small percentage of patients actually reacted, we would have to look at other things.
For the herpes or for?
For MECFS.
Ah, okay.
So, as this was the only approach that we had in those days, I decided actually that we would use Q-depressant in addition to other things that were being used. In England, B12 was being used, magnesium sulfate was being used, folic acid was being used. So I had the idea of maybe if we complex the Q-depressant with all these other things, that we'd get a better result. And indeed, after complexing various things over the last 15 years, we increased the efficacy of Q-depressant to about 65%.
Oh.
So 65% of patients actually improve
That's good.
on this complex.
Because I've taken Q-depressant on its own. And
On its own, it's not that effective.
No.
Has to be complex with other injectables.
What do you think of the valsite approach that Jose Montoya has tried out at Stanford?
Jose and I have actually discussed this.
Yeah.
I did my original virology at Stanford when I was there.
Aha, lucky you.
So I know Jose quite well.
Yeah.
HHV6, when the titer is 640 or above, we use valsite in addition to the Q-depressant complex.
Oh, interesting.
The idea being that valsite is toxic, and you have to weigh the toxicity of the valsite versus the symptoms in MECFS. And when it's 640 or greater, the titer, then you actually use HHV6.
What do you feel about clusters and the possibility that this is contagious in some way?
If you were here about 30 minutes ago, you would have seen actually two sisters who came in, both suffering.
Oh.
We actually see a number of patients in the same family suffering. Clusters, the original description of the disease by Melvin Ramsey was a cluster. Cluster of young doctors
Royal Free Hospital.
in the Royal Free Hospital, cluster of young doctors and nurses.
Does this tell you anything? It seemed to me that in America we had two very interesting clusters in 1985, which was
the
Incline
Incline
Village,
Village,
which is both
Yeah.
geographically and socioeconomically very different from upstate New York, Lindenville, where there was another one in the same year, almost
Iceland had a cluster.
almost the
Oh,
same.
really?
Has there been any research into the possible what is stimulating the disease in these circumstances? What the trigger is?
The obvious question is this an infectious disease that is actually clustered amongst actually people who are living close to each other or living in the same place? And the question is, well, if that's true, why isn't this disease more prevalent than actually 2% of the population? Jonathan Kerr and I actually came up with a theory that it's genetic. And we did actually, we co-wrote a paper together on the abnormal genome. The abnormal genome actually makes the disease more prevalent, or potentially more prevalent.
And you get some
Because the actual reaction, we've all actually been exposed to these viruses, because these are very common viruses. If this was actually a very peculiar virus, for example, if this was some virus that we were seeing 1 in 10 million people, then we could say, hey, this is actually an obvious etiological relationship. This peculiar virus, this peculiar disease, they are actually seen together. But when we actually have Epstein-Barr virus, which 90% of the population are exposed to, cytomegaloinclusion virus, human herpes virus 6, these are common viruses. So the question is, if they're very common viruses, why are you not suffering? Why am I not suffering from the disease? And the answer is that you have to have some genetic predisposition to have an abnormal reaction in your immune system. And what is that abnormal reaction in the immune system? Well, a fellow called Rich Koinenberg actually said to me, Derek, how did you come across actually this peculiar cutepressin, magnesium sulfate, folic acid, methylcobalamin complex. And I said, because it came at you by trial and error. He said, you know, it fits with the methylation cycle in the immune system. So
it's a gene affecting the...
We believe that it's a gene affecting an abnormal transponder in the methylation cycle.
So people shouldn't be worried about contagion. You're not, and you work with it every day.
Correct. So the methylation cycle, is this a possibility? Well, perhaps actually it's a suggestion. Ampligen, where does that work on? We're not quite sure. How does it work? Not quite sure. Why does it not work? We're not quite sure. Are there any other possibilities? Well, there's a possibility of GC-MAF, which is a macrophage activation factor, which Kenny Demirlier and I are working on at the moment. We have patients actually on GC-MAF.
What thought?
Same idea as ampligen.
What thought, if you could speak to all this enormous suffering community of people, maybe 1 million in America and 20 times that globally, what would you say to them that's hopeful?
This is a physical disease. This is not imagined. This is not a psychiatric disease. Changing actually one's outlook in life is not going to make a patient better. One cannot actually produce increased exercise and overcome this disease. In fact, in some cases, this might actually produce relapse. Exercise is good, over-exercise is bad. So graded exercise therapy, GET, is not the answer to this disease. Neither is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Susan Levine at one point had said to me, maybe 4 years ago, that they thought they were getting a grasp on being able to stop it if they caught it in the early phases. And I haven't had a chance to talk to her about whether anything has come of that. Do you know of anything?
Well, catching in the early phases is reverse. Yes, if we catch it in the early, actually, we can reverse some of the immune system reaction.
More readily.
More readily.